You know what I noticed the past little while? We've been making quite a few videos about the Boston Bruins every single time they appear to lose a hockey game. Or at least when they play a hockey game. Against the Canadiens, against the Red Wings, we're always talking about the games against Boston because these are the games that have the most to talk about. It's been a while since we've actually made a purely Boston-focused video, and so that changes today. We had ourselves Elliotte Friedman giving us some news that changes everything. This changes the game. He has heard the Bruins have poked around on Patrick Kane. And this is an idea that if you wanted to talk about guys who are already pretty good players, going over onto teams that are already really gosh darn strong, literally first in the entire NHL, Patrick Kane is arguably the cream of the crop when it comes to available guys right now. The Boston Bruins have themselves at least one roster spot that is freed up, with Milan Lucic getting placed on the LTIR. I mean, it's not really LTIR, but you get what I mean. That is just what's put here on Cap Friendly. But for Patrick Kane, being the superstar caliber player that he is, 35 years old, 5'10", 176, left-handed right winger, who is a recent point-per-game player in the postseason with the Rangers, this is totally a guy that could still provide some significant value in an NHL role. We're always repeating ourselves every time we make the Kane update video, but if he goes out there next season and scores, let's say at a 0.7 point per game pace, 0.7 is, what is that? 0.7 times 82, that's around a 57, 60 point pace. If he scores at that level of play, you're honestly not really too surprised. He had 90 points as far back as just 21-22, and even last season, after DeBrincat left, he still had 45 points in 54 Chicago Blackhawks games. Patrick Kane, for all intents and purposes, is still a stud NHL player. And if the Boston Bruins are going out there with the update saying that, hey, this is the Friedman quote, there are people who believe the Bruins have poked around on Kane. It's an opportunity to add to a good team without giving up assets. And so, of course, it's a poetic idea, one of the best free agents going to one of the best teams, but the interesting thing is, there are a bunch of Bruins fans that I'm seeing around this tweet. In particular, Ian McLaren literally says in the reply, it's a no for me, dog. In this tweet as well from the Bruins Bender podcast, there are a bunch of people going out there and saying, okay, I personally wouldn't do it. I don't think it's an appropriate move. Unless he signs for league minimum, there isn't really any reason to do something like this. Here's a perspective from Pete Blackburn. Here are my biggest questions with Kane to the Bruins. Who does he displace on the right side? Are you just trying to outscore defensive issues? More importantly, what number does he wear? Now that is an interesting idea at the very end there. David Pastrnak is number 88 in Boston, so what happens with Kane? You're not telling Pastrnak to change his number, and you're not really expecting Patrick Kane to do anything other than 88, so do you give him just 89? Do you try to get him to do some other double number, maybe 66 or 44? Do you give him 69? That'd be pretty cool. But, of course, this tweet goes out there and dispels some pretty interesting ideas. You know, who does he replace on the right side? If you go over to the Bruins and their lines, you've got Pasta, Frederic. Trent Frederic's actually been pretty solid this season, not gonna lie. I had him in fantasy for a little bit. The guy blocks shots like crazy, and he also does score quite a few points. The third line has Jake DeBrusk, Poitras, and Danton Heinen. If you wanted to say you could swap around somebody here, maybe move DeBrusk to the left wing spot, put Kane there on the third line, then that actually does sound like a pretty alright idea. But of course, if you're signing Patrick Kane to be a third line player, you don't want to expend all the money in the world to this guy. The Bruins right now have about $54,000 in cap space. As we did say, there is that savings from the Milan Lucic contract situation. So if Patrick Kane is willing to come over to Boston in some sort of a really cheap, limited dollar amount deal, then okay, that actually does look like a pretty intriguing idea. It's just, you need to make sure you're not expending the moon and the stars for this guy. You need to make sure you're not overpaying, and that Kane himself already has an expectation as to what he's going to be greeted with. The Bruins are not going to slot him in the top of the lineup. You're not dethroning David Pastrnak. If you want to say, okay, maybe top power play unit, okay, that's an interesting idea. Maybe replace James Van Riemsdyk or whatever. I know the Bruins have had a pretty alright run so far this season. They're literally first in the league. So things are working, and they're working well. How much do you want to change that right now by adding a guy like Patrick Kane, who will completely shift the dynamic of this forward core? I'm not sure. That's your prerogative. You can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. To help us out, though, with Patrick Kane and his own perspective, we're going over onto the Red Wings sub, because right here on our Red Wings, there was a post made about the 32 Thoughts podcast. Elliotte Friedman said that some of the winds are blowing towards Detroit. Elliotte did say you could call us the favorites right now. But Patrick Kane wants no leaks, so it's tough, especially when we have Yzerman in charge, who is also noted for no leaks too. Friedman noted that the Red Wings have some cap flexibility to make it work. Kane likes to bring it, and we have an easy travel schedule which could be attractive too. Among his sources that he trusts, Friedman says that one of his sources says Detroit for sure. Another says Detroit or Florida. Another said Dallas isn't out yet, but also Detroit and Florida are in the lead. So this idea of Boston, quote-unquote, poking around is just a very preliminary, basic idea. It's not going to go out there and blow the roof off of the house. It's not the number one leading rumor. If you had to do a Kane Power Rankings destinations thing, Boston's not going to be number one. You're probably looking at Detroit, you're probably looking at Florida, but the fact that the Bruins are indeed involved in this situation does make it interesting, because the best team in the entire NHL going out there and adding Patrick Kane would be super interesting, and then of course there's the entire idea of Kane himself playing on the Boston Bruins. From Chicago to Boston, how crazy is that? It's like Jonathan Quick and the New York Rangers this year. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about the idea of Patrick Kane heading over to the Boston Bruins. It's got to be some sort of a cheap deal if this is going to work out. You're not going to spend $2-3 million a year on Patrick Kane. If he wants that money, he's got to go elsewhere. But if it is a cheap deal with the Bees, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.